Good morning. This is Janet Smart, and I'm going to read to you today the first chapter of my historical fiction, Mama's Memories. This is what it says on the back. The time is 1924. The place is Blackberry Holler, which cuts through the Appalachian hills of West Virginia. Leading up to the birth of her 8th baby, Lucy comes upon many opportunities to reminisce and recollect about her past. Some memories are happy, such as the births of her babies, and others sad or frightening, like the time she almost lost her first baby by accidentally overdosing him on laudanum, and when her 2-year-old son died. Most frightening of all is when she finds an unopened note written to her 14 years earlier by her suspicious mother-in-law. The premonition frightens her and makes her anxious about the birth of this child. Will this baby be born without complications, or will her mother-in-law's premonition come true? On reading Mama's Memories, second in a trilogy, you will find yourself completely immersed in the day-to-day happenings of Lucy and her growing family. Check out my first book in this trilogy, Where the Stars Grant Wishes. This was the first book, Where the Stars Grant Wishes, and it takes place 1908, 1910, and same characters as in this book. I'll leave a link to it down below where you can check it out also. And I've also got a video where I'm reading from it. So, okay, now I'm going to start and I'm going to read the first chapter of Mama's Memories. Chapter 1, May 1924. I was about to give birth to my 8th child. I should be elated, but instead I was fearful. I feared that this baby might die. I never worried about my other births, even though my first one was life-threatening. I almost lost little Alex. But I found a letter written by Ma McNally the other day, ominous words she had written 14 years ago. Jonathan didn't know, and I was not going to tell him. He would just say I was back to my superstitious ways, and I didn't want that to happen. He always said I worried myself to death over things and happenings I couldn't control. He was right, of course. He was always right when it came to that sort of thing. I rummaged through our large trunk a few days ago, looking at the stored-away baby clothes. I was going to have Greta wash them and freshen them up before the baby came. That's when I came across the long-forgotten note. The letter had fallen behind a tear in the lining and not remembered all these years. My name on the envelope, written in a familiar penmanship, stirred my memory of it. I excitedly opened the page, still crisp to the touch after all these years, and read what had been written by Ma McNally on the day of her death. My excitement turned to fear. Shivers crawled down my spine. I shoved the paper back inside the envelope and returned it to its hiding place behind the soft, cottony lining of the chest. Oh, glory, why did I find this? Why couldn't it have stayed hidden from my eyes for another 14 years? I didn't like to keep secrets from Jonathan, but his Ma's letter would only put a frown on his face and wrinkles across his brow. So for now, I kept these words written by her to myself. My relationship with my mother-in-law had started out on rocky ground, with me thinking she was a witch. I feared her and wondered at times that if I did something displeasing to her, she might cast a spell on me. But I had grown to love and understand her ways. After the birth of baby Alex, I never feared her again or believed the cruel rumors people spread about her. But what she wrote down on paper, meant for my eyes only, on the day she passed, bothered my soul. Sweat beads formed on my forehead and trickled down my face. The taste of salt flowed over my lips and dripped off my chin. The month was only May, but the heat was stifling, especially to someone 8 months pregnant. If the sun was this hot in May, I dreaded what the weather had in store for us in late June. That's when the doctor said I would deliver. My belly stuck out so far now, I could swear it held a set of twins. But Dr. Goff insisted I carried only one baby. This was the second time I delivered a baby in the middle of summer, and I hoped I never would again. At 33, I had already given birth to 7 babies. If anyone were to tell me when Jonathan and I exchanged I-do's in the front room of Ma's house on my wedding day, I'd be the mama of so many young'uns by now, I would never have believed him. Pa told me I was a baby-making machine. A person shouldn't feel so old at such an early age. I think this machine needed a little maintenance. It seemed like only yesterday I was but a girl, so young and so pretty, and had no one to take care of but Jonathan. Maybe I should think about not having any more babies, but Jonathan was determined to get his 10, 5 boys and 5 girls. I'm sure if he was the one to carry them, he would only We would only be a family with one child instead of 7. And just think, I had 3 more to deliver before I reached number 10. I was tempted to sit in the yard and hunt for 4-leaf clovers, but the prospect of having to struggle to get back up kept me from enjoying one of my favorite pastimes. So I opted to go back in the house. I longed for the breeze flowing through the windows, fluttering the lacy curtains in its path, and bringing in the scent of the purple lilacs. Decoration day was a-comin', and even though my stomach stuck out like a sweet green striped watermelon, ready to be picked from Mr. Slayton's garden, I was determined to make the tiresome trip up to the cemetery. Neglected graves were a shameful thing, and our graves weren't going to be neglected. This time of year was an unhappy time, but also a time of fellowship. Each year we packed a wicker picnic basket with our favorite foods, and all the family made a day out of it. Everyone would tramp up the path through the thick woods, smelling springtime fresh, to the cemetery where tombstones were few. Most graves were marked as smooth rocks, some of which were covered with green moss that obscured the names carved into them. Jonathan ambled into the house with 2 of our young'uns hanging onto him. His right arms wrapped around Grady, hoisting him up against his body. His dirty feet dangled about at the bottom of his rolled-up coveralls. Lillian hung onto the leg of his work pants, her face red from crying. Grass stains were on her heel, with a bruise beginning, and a trace of blood trickled down. They had been on their best behavior when I sat out there earlier, but Grady took advantage of my absence as soon as I disappeared into the house. He was my youngest, but also my orneriest. Hopefully, when my baby came, he'd be grown out of that stage. Darling, you'll never guess what I caught Grady doing. Jonathan lowered the squirming body down to the floor. I found this here boy of ours a-chasing Lillian around the yard, throwing rocks at her. He hit me on the heel, Mama. My foot hurts. She turned around and pointed to her bare foot. Looky, if it bleeds too much, Pa, will you say your verse over it? She stared up at her pa with a pout and pleaded with her eyes red and puffy from crying. A tear puddled in the corner, ready to spill out. Well, what have you got to say for yourself, Grady? I said. Nothing. I didn't throw the rock very hard. I wouldn't hurt my sissy for nothing. He grinned, and dimples sank into his pudgy cheeks. You're going to be a big brother in a few months. You've got to start behaving better. You're not a baby anymore. I'm not going to be the baby? Grady sniffed and wiped the back of his dirty hand across his nose, spreading a path of slime clean to his ear. Come over here. I motioned with my hands. Come on. I took my hanky, spit on it, and wiped his face, then ran my fingers through his silky, thick curls. He was hard to say no to. I found it difficult to discipline him when he looked at me with those gray eyes, the color of the little mice that lived in the fields, and just as cute. My heart melted when he smiled. I sighed and looked up at Jonathan. I hoped he knew what to do or say. If little Jessie were here, he'd run out under the willow tree and find me a switch. Grady was going to have to learn he couldn't get away with everything just because he was the youngest. You'll always be my baby, I said, but now you're going to be a big brother, too. Here, put your hand on my belly. Feel that? He placed his hand on top of my apron I'd made from a soft feed sack just last month. Bright and clean, it hadn't had time to gather stains like most of the other ones I wore. Mama, something's in your belly. It's a-moving. That's going to be your baby sister. I thought you were just a little fleshy. A little fleshy? Would you hear that? Startled, I was taken aback and at a loss for words. Why, you, Mama. You said the other day Miss Mamie was a little fleshy. She's got a big belly just like you. Jonathan burst out laughing. What am I going to do with this one? Little Grady doesn't know any better. I'm going to have to watch what I say around him. No, honey, I'm not just a little fleshy. Now you go on outside and play. But first tell your sister you're sorry. I'm sorry, Sissy. Sissy, I won't throw rocks at you anymore. You better not, said Lillian. I'll tell the boogeyman on you. Lillian, there's no such thing as the boogeyman. I swan, what am I going to do with you young'uns? Now you two get on outside and quit your bickering. Go on, scoot. I patted Grady on his bottom. Yes, Mama. He looked at me so sincere with those innocent eyes, looking just like his pa did when he tried to sway me. Can you have a baby boy? I already got 3 sisters. He sniffed again and wiped his nose on his shirt sleeve. I couldn't hold back my laugh. I'm sorry, but it's not up to me. We get what we get, I said, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a girl. Grady slumped and followed his sister back out into the yard. Darling, are you going to be able to handle another little boy along with Grady? Of course, Greta is such a help. I don't know what I'd do without our oldest girl sometimes. Raising babies isn't easy. We've been through a lot together. This makes me think of the time Alex was little and such a handful for a new mom. Remember when we walked over the hill to my cousin Melvin's funeral? Oh, why did Jonathan have to remind me? The guilt I held inside was just as bitter as the taste of the drug I gave my baby, and that remorse was going to stay with me the rest of my life. Thank goodness Alex survived and lived to be the fine boy he was now. I sighed. I could never forget that sad and sorrowful time. Those days that followed were the most frightening in my life. How could I have been so careless? You weren't careless. You just didn't know any better. We've learned a lot since then. I guess everyone's first child is lucky to live through the mistakes of the parents. I tried to block the memory out of my mind. I said, we can't go back and change what happened, but I still remember every detail of what took place as if it was yesterday. ... That's the end of chapter 1. And chapter 2 starts out, Lauderman Scare, summer of 1910. I hope you enjoyed the reading of the first chapter of Mama's Memories. It's on Amazon. I'll put a link to it down below. And I'll also put a link to my other one. And said Mama's Memories, Janet S. Smart.